Hello, we are live. Let's just check everything's working. Hello, everyone. Yep.
Nice to
Let's.
see you, Kieron. I haven't seen you for a while.
Yeah, it has genuinely been a while, in that kind of weird way. Yes, we're properly live. So I better tweet this, otherwise the internet goes mad. I've got like two images on me, so I'm always slightly creepy when I've got the sort of the dualness. Let's lob it on Twitter.
I have my phone just to check it.
I would say, basically, I'm just posting on Twitter, everybody. I can see your chat, so feel free to ask questions in the chat, and I will report it to Stephanie. The plan for today is we are just gonna talk nonsense. Stephanie and I always have trouble understanding each other because I talk too quickly and too English, and it's like
French.
I'm unintelligible, and like I'm just useless. So like you're gonna get to see
in getting some Kieron,
Yes, you're going to get me raw and uncut.
But I'm losing my English because I've been stuck in France for so long now that I'm literally losing my words in both languages, if that makes sense. It doesn't.
Yeah. I have started learning Italian this year, and I've said this, and now someone's going to ask me to speak Italian, and the entire language will have disappeared from my head.
Well, Chrissy speaks Italian.
Yeah. I mean, Chrissy is half Italian, so her mum's Italian, and like we've got a lot of relatives. So the reason why I've started learning Italian is just so I can speak to them, because they speak some English, but like it would make obviously the thing to do is make the minimum of effort and actually try to speak to my relatives. So I am.
As a French people, I'm pretty sure I can fake speaking Italian to other French people. Maybe not to Italian though, but it's the same roots. So I have a small formation in Latin. So sometimes I try to speak Italian, but it's actually Spanish.
Chrissy says that she gets by in Spanish a little, as in that Spanish and Italian seems to be very close, and we get this kind of so she kind of just waves her hands and kind of like speaks a little bit more of an accent, and it seems to work better. Who knows? I don't speak either properly.
My friend Kieron, when he came to Germany, when I used to live in Germany, he's like, I don't understand how I can understand half of the language. It's like, yeah, but it's because like some words are basically the same and some other are totally different. And he was literally understanding half of it, which was strange.
My favorite thing is actually when I'm learning Duolingo, which is working for me, and how to phrase this? It does stuff like the Italian word for pasta is pasta, and it's like Duolingo. I'm not, stop leave me alone. Stop mocking me. So I've gone onto my headphones just so the sound's slightly better for me.
I know some people who are convinced they speak Japanese just because they watched a lot of animes. I have a brother like that. But that's just weird, because they actually know some words, but they are most of the time useless. Like I was talking with, it's like, yeah, I know a lot of words. I know Kasan, Basan, like yeah, mommy and daddy. Well, you won't use that a lot, That was funny.
That is great. Awesome. I was going to say, so we'll talk briefly. So coming out today is the what's it called? The Great Game. That's the comic we've done, and that's coming out. That's in shops. It's in bookshops next week. We are exhausted, having finished the arc. Stephanie's at work on issue 16. And so, like, the idea was just to sort of generally bring people together and generally relax. In fact, there's probably some of it on behind you on the screen. I was actually going to ask Stephanie if we could actually what we can see behind it, depending how spoilery it is.
Sorry.
Excellent. And we have two friends with us. We have Ryan and Clayton, who are, of course, currently in the guest room. Shall we bring them both in at once? Because I feel bad that they're both sitting there.
Clayton is here. Oh, that's so cool. I haven't seen him in like 3 years.
Let me show you him. Here he is.
3? Is it 3 years? I feel like it's been much longer.
I think so too, actually. But I haven't been in NYCC for 3 years. So
Yeah.
you're at least 3 years. But
Yeah, my last memory of you is you and Cullen Bunn trading barbs over dinner at some fancy ass restaurant during the Fearless Defenders days, and that was quite a while ago.
I actually saw him like the last time I went to NYCC. I was like, "Do you remember this?" And he was still crying about it.
Well, you won. You kicked his ass.
He asked for it.
He was.
I was actually telling him that when I was going to United States, I was tuning down the French humor because French humor is basically very mean. Like, no, I can take it. Just go. I was like, yeah, well, he was crying. That was nice. So how have you been?
Fine. I'm functioning. This is a most welcome distraction from how the year has been. Wow, that's the Ryan Hughes. Man, I totally bought your book last year and I voted for it in the Eisners and stuff.
You were the one who voted for me, right? Good.
Yeah, it was me.
The one.
I take full credit.
Yeah, no, I think we've probably worked on many things, but never ever met or spoken before. So
there's
cool.
This thing, Bitch Planet. I'm sure there's more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
it's weird, isn't it? You collaborate in this international way. I realised I had a conversation on Skype or Zoom a month or so ago with a bunch of people who I had been working for 8 years, and I had never even had a conversation on the phone with them.
wow.
It had been done through email, and then finally we had this kind of. It was like a party. We sort of brought beer and just chatted for hours and hours and hours, and it was bizarre. It was like you were old friends who had never even met.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about comics, like how we can never meet, but then just instantly feel comfortable with each other once we're speaking with our voices or we're seated in the same place together.
Yeah. But I mean, having sort of emails back and forth, probably tens of thousands of words, but never ever spoken or seen people. This is the modern world.
Yeah. Like the song.
Yeah.
I do find it's like there's people who I don't even, especially it's comics, there's people I don't even know what they look like. So it's this kind of, all I know is the kind of the email, as in the name, isn't, okay, that's a thing.
We need glamorous stunt doubles, Kieron. We should sort of hire them for our sort of public appearances.
I think it's the other way around. The fact that we work in this very nerdy career means that I was hired as a kind of nerd model for a very beautiful man or something. And it's like, no, this guy's too pretty to be a comic writer. Instead, we get a guy like me who can, be the part.
So who plays us in the movie version of this? That's what I want to know.
The movie version of of the die creation process. That's right. Who would play you, Ryan? Actually, Stephanie, you haven't talked.
I'm pretty sure. Let's see, still act. I want Kylie Minogue.
Kylie, that's good.
Ooh. Oh, man. I wanted Kylie. Well, now that Kylie's off the table, the last person who I heard cast, pick out my celebrity doppelganger said Hugh Dancy, and I was extremely flattered, so I'm going to stick with him.
Nice.
Ryan?
Oh, God. Well, who do you think?
That's a trick question.
Give me some suggestions.
I would just cast you as actual Dan Dare,
Oh, yeah. I could, a young Frank Hansen. Eddie Izzard could play me. I think he'd do a good job.
I must say, I think there was I was having dinner once a few years ago. Actually, it's the Mark Miller con. What's it called? Kapow in London. And they had one of those dinners afterwards downstairs in some bar. And I turned the corner sharply on the way out the toilet. And Frankie Boyle had just turned the corner. And he had his big beard at the time. And I've got a very Celtic sort of background. And we both started like we walked into a mirror. So I immediately go, let's cast Frankie Boyle. The idea, me being incredibly, Frankie Boyle could do a good me in terms of not the me I am online, shall we say, the much more monstrous real life me.
Well, if Eddie Izzard plays me and Frankie Boyle plays you, then we're just having comedians for the English side of this equation here. What does that say?
I think that is very accurate. Yeah.
Those guys have range. Eddie Izzard does serious roles from time to time.
True.
Suggestions from the thing. Chat says Clayton looks like a shining era Jack Nicholson.
Wow. I'm not sure how to take that. I guess
I
COVID-19's had an effect on me, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess it is. It is the year when we all kind of.
now.
That's what writing has been like this year. In this kind of Chrissy comes in to check how progress is going. I've just written the word "die" 8 million times.
Oh, God.
Takes on a new resonance, doesn't it?
Yeah. Someone says I should obviously be played by Karen Gillan. Thank you, Ezeka.
Yes.
And Phil, you think Stephanie looks kind of like Olivia Colman, like younger, I presume. Like so, but like we've got to age ourselves up a bit, I guess. She's great. I love Olivia Colman.
She was great in Hot Fuzz.
Yeah. Oh, she's great at everything.
Yeah.
Like, Olivia Colman's growth as an actor in terms of position culturally is something I've just genuinely loved to see.
She's literally playing the queen.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay. Questions. Let's get. I missed one earlier, which is nice. Actually, let's. Actually, this is kind of flipping it around. Ramsey. Hello, Ramsey. He loves Dai fan casting for a TV series. If we were casting Dai as a TV show, who would we cast as characters? And I say I'm really bad at this. I'm like fame. Everyone always asks me, and I never. Like any of my shows, I have no answers for anything because I don't remember names or faces. So everyone else will take lead. I actually have one answer for Ash, and that's it. I'm not even sure I would do that anymore, to be honest. Please, anyone got to jump on that?
Then the thing is, I actually have models sometimes for the characters, so I don't know if I should say it.
Yeah.
What if we guess first and then you tell us?
Yeah, sure.
When you say models, you mean you friends of yours or
Oh well.
well-known people?
Actually, you know that Isabelle has been modeled out of one of my French friends, who's who's actually born Korean and adopted in France too, and they are very much alike. But she's not an actress.
That's one of the interesting about Dyers. Like when we were creating it, me and Stephanie, I had a bunch of ideas, and Stephanie always had stuff that she wanted to fold in. So she talked about that's at least it's not to tell that Izzy is like French. It's very clearly the French influence into the comic we kind of bring in. And you'll laugh. Ryan, actually, that's a good thing to do. Is Sean Dillon, excellent critic, asks about he wants to ask about XX.
It's your show, Kieron.
Yeah. I know, so I say, let's have a quick plug for XX because it's an amazing book, and I think if people are here, I presume they already like Die. They need to know about XX now as well.
Well, I think we're just going for the short titles here, 3- and 2-letter titles.
Yeah, ungoogleable
addresses. We've got to get in quick before they're all used up. Well, no, well, thank you, Kieron. I've probably thanked you many times, but I'll thank you again for a great quote that's on the back cover of the English and on the American edition as well. So, which I presume that you wrote after reading it rather than before.
No, that's the thing is I give quotes quite seriously, and that's why I know there are some people who will do the I've read the first line, that'll do.
Yes.
But no, I'm not. If I haven't read it, I won't give a quote.
You're not like Krusty the Clown who says, "I fully support this event and publication."
Mr. Black.
And in the case of XX is like 1,000 pages long. So someone's like, Ryan, how dare you?
I need a quote now. Anyway, but back to Die. This is your show.
Oh yeah. I was about to say.
I have a question for you, actually, Kieron, from a graphic design point of view on Die. Is that because we have the unfolding Die on the back cover? Did you factor into your planning of this that you would only have 4 volumes because there's only, or 5 volumes? I forget how many there is on the side of. No, it's a. God, I designed the back cover and I can't remember how many sides on the dice are there.
20.
So that's 5 volumes of 4 issues or 4 volumes of 5 issues?
4 volumes of 5 issues. It's that kind of, we've deliberately sort of, we've sort of said it, I wouldn't say it's an intelligence test, but like all the way, like there's 20 things on the cover. And of course, there's always the option if we overrun to just go off the side of the grid in a very meta fashion. Which I would love is, oh man, galaxy brain. But,
yeah, you can't. It would break the. You've got to have the graphic design continuity. The idea, the high concept, has got to be solid and adhered to. So you can't have one of those double-sized extra issues to sort of cram it all in at the end. You've got to plan it precisely.
I must say, it's one of the most. I think I have a moment of being utter foolishness where, like, the fact the issues are 24 and 25 pages long, so it's like they're longer than normal issues, and it's like, why did I do that? It kills Stephanie. It means we come out slower. You know, we literally leave all this money. You know, every other comic on the market's 20 pages, and it's like we're just hurting our money. Yeah.
I can also tell you that the first one was 30 pages.
Oh yeah, of course. Actually, it was longer. I'm sorry.
Yeah, wasn't it like 56 pages or something?
Yeah,
and the second one was 30.
You want to tell me?
Monstrous was like a triple-sized issue. It was kind of like Saga was double-sized, Monstrous was triple-sized, and it's one of those kind of like, yeah, that. And for a while, that people seem to think that's a really good way to launch an Image series. And plus, I think it still is. Like, if you that first issue buy-in is really exciting.
Yeah,
I'd say worth noting. We sort of said softly a few times that we're finishing at 20. And we're sort of implicitly we're finishing at 20. But I think this is probably the first time we've ever actually said it in public, really. So yeah, the story is planned to end on 20. But like we're still I mean, this is the funny thing you mentioned, Ryan, is the formal thing. It's like if we ever do a sequel, like it'll be like on the 12 issues, because it'll be the 12-sided dice. You know what I mean? Like
you could have you could have a pair of 10-sided dice and do 100 issues.
Yeah. I think there is. You can actually get
Stephanie, but
we'll need to find another illustrator.
Or clone you. I was about to say. We also, whilst we're talking, we've got another guest who's just arrived, and I don't know her very well, so make her feel very welcome. It's editor Chrissy Williams.
Who?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
It's good to see everyone's faces. Well, I know you already covered this, but yeah, seeing faces rather than just communicating in email or on the Slack is kind of amazing. So, hi.
You do that more often.
Can someone explain what this Slack thing is? Because when I was a kid, it was a type of trouser.
Slack is a popular piece of like forum software. Basically, it's part instant message, part project management system, part water cooler. So a load of like people use it for small forums, but people also use it for running small projects. So like we had one for WicDiv, we had one. We've got like the people have to talk basically all the time, or quite often on a Slack. So me, Chrissy, and Stephanie are on one.
So Clayton and I haven't been invited, obviously.
Yeah, because it's not like it's
That's
just,
okay.
Can you imagine how many?
We'll create our own, Clayton. Don't worry, we'll talk about them when they're not around.
How many
Yeah, I'll
Slacks?
send you the password.
How many Slacks do you think Clayton would be on if he was invited to every single Slack? That was my kind of thinking.
I had
It's
to
like-
guess. I would say at least 35.
Yeah.
I'm only on 4. Lucky for me.
Oh.
How many books actually are you doing at the moment, Clayton?
Oh, I don't know. I'm guessing around 20. Maybe 18, not counting Die and Bitterroot, which are both on hiatus right now, at least for me. But my big 2 books I think add up to about 20 right now.
Wow.
You work so much.
It's a living.
And thank you for the stuff you're doing on Eternals, by the way. It's the first time we've sort of spoke face to face since you've started doing that.
And Warhammer.
Yeah. I was like, it's like, especially Eternals, like you're doing the design stuff as well. Means it's kind of like it's a whole kind of different sort of area as well, I guess.
Kind of. It feels really familiar actually, because we did a ton of that on Young Avengers, and I was telling my boss about this when we were setting up the work arrangement that I haven't really had a book like that at Marvel since Young Avengers ended, where I'm doing all this extra stuff for it, but as a result, I feel closer to it and more fond and protective of it. So it feels like a return to form after 5 years away. And I got to do a ton of like fun minimalist graphic design work, and scratch that itch. It was nice to stretch that muscle after a while.
Yeah, it's fun. Like, I quite like Eternals is coming out the first week of like January, so it's like obviously the delay is annoying, but like starting a whole new year with a whole new book's kind of fun. You know, that kind of like, as Ryan was sort of saying, the formalism. The idea of years as formalism is something that appeals to me. There's an indie series I want to do, which is basically 12 issues, one a month, and then reboot the whole comic every year. And I just have it kind of all do 11 issues and the trade out in December, and have it a kind of somehow a weird part of the rhythm of the years, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'll turn to questions to quickly. We were asked by Ezekar, has anyone here, beside Kieron, played Die? Have they?
Nope.
I played it once.
Yeah. Stephanie has. Stephanie played Gone By on DS?
Of course.
That does look like fun.
Yeah. Ryan, you haven't, have you?
Well, when you say played Die, you mean played your version of the game? No,
Yes.
I haven't.
Yes. I presumed you hadn't, but like, you know,
I've
unless
not played the role-playing game that we used to play when we were kids. I don't think I've ever played Dungeons and Dragons, but we played a thing called Traveller when I was at school, which was like a sci-fi one, and another one based on Call of Cthulhu, which I remember basically everyone slowly goes mad and very few characters make it through to the end.
Yeah.
But I've never played Dungeons and Dragons. So I've got to confess that I've never read Lord of the Rings either. So out of my when it comes to the sort of high fantasy canon, I'm sorely ill-equipped to know what I'm talking about.
That's unforgivable.
Fake geek boy.
I know. I was more of a science fiction guy. I was like I was into sort of Arthur C. Clarke and the sort of hard sci-fi stuff rather than the sort of magic and barbarians and dragons, and that didn't sort of appeal to me as much as spaceships and explosions and violence and great stuff.
Honestly, like when we started talking about doing the die design, that was at least part of it, as in we didn't want it to look like your classic, you know, ye oldie. You wanted it to feel like weird, sort of creepy and modernist, and you know, very clean. That was always kind of
that's a good point, actually. There is a sort of graphic design vernacular that you expect to see on a kind of high fantasy novel, and it borrows a bit of sort of Art Nouveau. So you get a bit of Alphonse Mucha in there, you get a bit of Michael Moorcock, you get a bit of sort of West Coast psychedelia, sort of filtered through, you know, the West Coast psychedelic revival of all of that sort of 1920s organic stuff. It's like there's a whole language out there that your sort of high fantasy novel should have on the front cover, and we ignored it all, as is right and proper.
Yeah, it was explicit. I remember having the conversation with actually Stephanie as well that like I didn't want to have any homages. There's some really good comics that do great D&D cover homages, and it's like no, I'm like the entire book is a deconstruction. Let's not do homages. That's something a bit of a different energy.
Well, and I agree, because I think that from a graphic designer's point of view, you're quite often asked to make it look like something else. And I always think that unless you're slyly commenting on it and maybe twisting it a bit, there's no real point. It's a bit like being asked to write a pastiche of something with a straight face. Yeah. So, you know, it's like wearing someone else's clothes, and it's you know, whereas dressing up is fun, you're not creating anything new. You're not projecting anything fresh to it. So as a graphic designer, I always think that if you do work in a style, you've got to subtly undermine it or work against it in some way, shape or form. You can't just regurgitate it as is.
If the references are very old and you take the risk of having your book look a bit already aged, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I think so. If you
but also you forget that everything has to be invented for the first time once. So the reason that the fantasy novels look like that, someone must have come up with that out of thin air at some point in time. So why not come up with something new out of thin air that in 10, 20, 30, 40 years, people are going to be pastiching, thinking that that is the way that you do it.
Yeah. Talking about covers briefly, actually not briefly, talking about covers extensively if we want. It's our stream. Stephanie, do you want to talk about how do you, when you start putting ideas together for a cover, because that's how you really first became known in like the American marketplace. Like, how do you approach covers? How does your thinking work? Because you're always trying to reinvent yourself. You're not somebody who does just Stephanie Hands. You're somebody who's always you're in conversation with who Stephanie Hands is.
Well, for covers, it's always a mix of the thing I want to do, the thing I have the time to do. It's basically the work of the cover artist is managing the time versus creativity. But for me, I'm mostly like most of my references come from traditional painting, old school painting, the old illustrators from the 30s. So there's always something I'm picking out of it, if I can. But when I do a cover, there are two approaches. One is the pinup, is when I don't have time and I don't have any material to work with, is basically building a nice cover out of nothing. And in our case, which was also the case on Journey into Mystery, because I have basic knowledge of what's in the script, or sometimes I have the script if it's written. I'm doing it. I'm trying to, I'm very much a fan of putting things in plain sight. Like basically the first cover when we designed the mock-up, and I really wanted to put the whole dice on the cover, but because it wasn't folded, it was only if you knew what you were looking for or looking at that it was like this is it. And this is what I like with covers. I'm always trying to put most of the answers on some covers, but not in an obvious way. Like if you look at it after, you say, this is what was meant to tell, I guess. And also I like to switch mood, like because we have arcs, I like to find a theme for the arc. Like I think it was very obvious for the third and the second one. Like the first one was the introduction of each character, so it was like more like pinups. And then the second one, I wanted to do covers with only secondary, like non-playing characters. And I think that was kind of fun because nobody ever thought that was weird, even if I thought it was a bit weird. And the third one, I wanted to, because the party was split, I really wanted to tell two stories in each covers. And because of our giant size shape, dice 20 on the cover, we could do that, because there are two ways of using it. Is like the passive or active way, maybe. One where you just use it as a decorative element, and the other one when you use it to actively tell the story. Sorry, I'm talking a lot.
No, that's the point.
Sorry.
I'm trying to move the conversation around the room. I've fallen into journalist mode. I was just saying, the thing you struck is like when I started working with you, it was that you were very much like obviously doing you've done pinups, but especially on Journey to Mystery, it was so much about you being a narrative painter. You were painting a scene, and that's kind of I think that's when like becoming friends, because I could tell that you were telling stories here, and that's and it's like in Die when you were doing the covers early on, we did the cover for the Elf Queen. And that was an alternate cover. You just did it overnight, as it was one of those situations. Literally, Image said on Wednesday, was it Wednesday night? They said, "Can we have a new cover by tomorrow?"
Yeah,
and of course,
I'm pretty sure it was.
And we said, "We'll do a recolor." And then Stephanie just stayed up all night and did the cover because something drives her. And the second I saw that, I was like, "Oh no, she's coming back." Like she's now a major character. I'm going to bring back again and again. Because that's just too good a cover to leave like that. And it's the dialogue of the book is really interesting there.
Yeah.
Christy, sorry.
I was thinking about all the very late retakes we had to do for the reprinting. Like, do you remember that last year, exactly a year and 2 months ago, I was at the hospital and I was doing very basic recoloring of the shape. Well, I had literally morphine pump in one hand and my stylus in the other one.
Oh my god. This
Chrissy,
industry, I swear.
Yeah. I was about to say, Chrissy, do you want to talk a bit about that in terms of like trying to, herd those cats?
No. Well, that was just a horrific situation. I think we were actively saying like, put the stylus down. It's okay. We'll find. There'll be another solution.
It was literally a 1 hour correction. It was just a slight change of color.
It's bonkers. Yeah. So the reason I just laughed a second ago, because I saw one of the questions pop up that was, Clayton, what's it like lettering all of Kieron's words all of the time? And it really made me laugh, because I imagine it's pretty horrific, no?
Time has no meaning for me anymore. It's just a cycle. One thing ends, another begins. I like it a lot. That's why I keep doing it.
Aww. There's a really good podcast with Clayton being interviewed, Die Compressed, which is it's basically a podcast about Die, but they're presently interviewing like most of the members of the team, and it's and Clayton just did one, which is a really interesting interview about how Clayton does his stuff. But feel free. You're too kind about. Actually, when I was listening, I can't remember what it was. There's definitely one bit I was like, no, Clayton, you should be meaner to me. There was definitely comes like, oh, you've let me off the hook there. Yeah.
I save my venom for much worthier targets.
Okay.
You've been very good to me over the years. I have no shade to cast toward you. I love you, buddy. It's good to see you.
Oh. To loop round to a question we had earlier, Chrissy, like they were asked, has anyone actually played the Die RPG? Now, Chrissy didn't answer that, and Chrissy definitely has played the Die RPG. In that, Chrissy, do you want to talk about how much you've played the Die RPG?
I'm pretty sure you played beta tester.
Yeah, I played. Well, I think I played one of. Maybe it wasn't the first playtest you ever did. I think it was the second one, that one at EasterCon. And I've played like a couple of 1 or 2 session ones with you. But then this year, every single Saturday afternoon, yeah, we've been playtesting the Die RPG campaign. Well, it's finished now. It finished a couple of weeks ago, and all of us cried, and it was incredibly powerful in ways that actually, some ways you could sort of see coming, but actually there were other things about it that were unexpectedly moving. Yeah, it's been fun. I played, what did I play? I played an Emotion Night. Although I think I have a lot of envy for whoever plays the Fool. I really love the Fool because it's the easiest one to play. It's the dumbest one. It's the most fun. It's like when everyone else is trying to create something serious, you can just cut straight through it and barge in. And well, like Saxy ended up punching the fair in the nuts. Like it was ridiculous things. But yeah, it was really interesting. It sort of grew and grew every week. I've never played a long campaign like that. I've only ever played, I think, 3 session games before. Yeah. Well, what should I say about it, Kieron?
You talk about anything, literally anything you want. Like, tell us about your character. Talk about like, because you've like, download a little bit. What sort of Emotion Night were you?
So it started off being, it started off being the one that we then had to ditch because it just didn't work. A night of resignation. I chose being resigned to your fate as like an emotion to drive you through the story. What was I thinking? Like I deliberately picked it. I deliberately picked it because Kieron was like, yeah, I've got no idea how this one will work. And so I said, well, let's find out. And it was just someone who was resigned to every piece of drama. It was so tedious. So then we turned into Shame. Shame, very powerful, very fun, very
oh, God.
and then And then I picked up a second sword, which was, I was literally just doing maths in my head of like the actual comic. Anyway, picked up a second sword, which was anger, and was Johnny two swords for a while. I died. That was fun. I died for weeks, and then I came back. Yeah, it's really fun. Like, it got to a point where all of us were actively really pushing to die. Like, oh, someone's going to die. We've got to see what happens. Come on, someone, let it be me. Let it be me.
Yeah. And then you're at the fool, like the fool offering his neck up to you in this like big sacrifice, and that kind of like the fool has hopelessly loved Chrissy's character for years. It was all a load of drama. It was a lot of fun. Actually, Chris, you mentioned one of the fun things about like playing along a campaign. You get to do stuff like the emotion knights changing their emotions. Like you start off being resigned, and you dig beneath. Oh no, it's really about shame. And then towards the end, anger comes in. There's lots of things you do with a different palette like that. Anyway,
it sounds like a therapy session.
Yes. So I'm going to write about my next newsletter about how the campaign ended, but like it was just a big teary mess. It was really, I was like really excited by how emotional it was. I had to stop the stream for like 5 minutes after the tragic end for a certain character.
Part of the system of asking people like for flashbacks to their characters' younger days, like in the comic, you see the younger characters and the older characters. So when on the fly you're being asked for information about what your character did when they were younger, you automatically go back to your own memories a lot of the time and kind of move things around. But there's a lot of bleed between your memories and what you're building into your character's memories. So by the end of like running this thing for a whole year, there was a lot of messy kind of overlap here and there, like nothing explicit at all, I think, but yeah, by the end of it, I think we were really kind of sucked into it. In a way that you want, right? You want to be emotionally drawn into these things and tortured and devastated when they finish, because it's a Kieron game, so devastation is the way.
The first campaign I played, my character died after 2 years. I was devastated.
Oh.
I was very invested in the character. I had a new one after, but it was never the same.
So, Clayton, you haven't played many RPGs, right? Is that you remind me?
I played a brief D&D campaign where I was a bard. I didn't really take to it. I enjoy the role-playing aspect a lot. I also played a bard who was blind, and it was fun doing blind guy shenanigans until the DM cursed me with sight. And yeah, it was. I'm glad I did it so I could at the very least get like more of a mechanical glimpse into how die would end up working. I was doing this before die would ever before I knew this would even be a thing. But yeah, I'm glad I came into it armed with this knowledge.
So I should when we get to issue 20, I should completely just run a one-off for you guys, and somehow I'll write a very meta scenario about die, and we'll work out how that goes.
Can I be a designer?
Yes.
Can I have a skill in typography or something like that? I could do with that.
Oh, then what am I gonna do? It's my only thing, man.
Well,
maybe the game could be only one typographer. Sorry.
I could play Clayton.
yeah. We play each other.
That's it. That's the game I always want to suggest on Twitter in terms of tweet like somebody else day, and that's just basically going to be everyone's going to kill each other. That kind of like. There's no good will come of that.
No, you could say something really offensive, and then would it be you, or would it be the person who you were tweeting in? Yeah.
Nothing good can come of that.
No.
Stop making sense.
Turning to the questions, let's go. Ritesh Babu, who is an excellent critic, mentions that I sort of use planetary as a reference point for the episodic explorations, but they're talking about. Actually, Ritesh is sucking up to me. God bless you. The nature of the work, the almost academic effort and density, all make me think much more of From Hell, which made me go, "That's very kind." But like, again, I can kind of. I don't know about anyone else, but like, I can sort of see that almost. Like I don't think I've gone as deep as Alan has, but like I'm shamelessly influenced by Alan more, you know. And this is a book, especially now in this new volume, which people may be about to read, that the conspiratorial nature of it is kind of much more to the fore. And in some ways, like, you know, From Hell was about this fantasy about how the 20th century was given birth. And I spoke, and only literally when I was answering that question, I realized Die is a story about how the 21st century is being born. You know?
Ooh. Oh, you're getting deep now, Kieron.
Yeah. And I never quite saw it in that way, but where this story heads, or rather the stuff that's already implicit in that kind of the awfulness of 2020, both within and outside the comic.
Here's a question for you. I think that it's very much easier to see these kind of overarching patterns in history when you look back, but projecting them forward, nothing dates faster than science fiction, with a few exceptions. So if you're projecting forward, what would you say the sort of spirit and the theme of the 21st century is going to be? What would your guess be?
There's my situations where a lot of my stories, I take a position in the story. That's way of putting it. So Die has a specific position. So I'd rather not say exactly, but obviously Die's themes be about the nature of fantasy, the nature of stories, the nature of, and some, you know, consumerism, the nature, how all these things sort of tie together. So the fact that this arc's out today makes me not want to sort of go into detail specifics about that. But
spoilers.
When you read like the great, but this arc and the next arc, I think a lot of those kind of ideas can be very much to the fore. And it's a lot about, I have to think about disaster capitalism. I think about
disaster capitalism,
capitalist realism by Mark, whose name I forget, Mark Fisher, about the idea that it's easy to imagine the end of the world and the end of capitalism was his take. And that's an incredibly sad sentence, the idea that, I can imagine like zombies taking over the earth, but I can't imagine just the world changing how we organize it. You know, and that was a very specific and awful, dread way to think about it. And in some ways, Die is a conversation about that. I mean, on the front,
about the end of capitalism,
often aggressively take positions which are extreme and complicated. By which, I mean, look at What's the Future. What's the Future says it has a very simple position, which is all stories are bad. You know? And I don't believe that, clearly. But like part of the game of What's the Future is imagine if all stories are bad. Let's roll with it. And then we use that to talk about, and of course, what we're really talking about is how stories can be bad.
Well, this is really interesting, Kieron, because I had like a 2 or 3 hour Zoom catch up with Dave Hine last week, and we were talking about how if you read journalism now, it's written like a story. Instead of being a reportage of the facts of the matter, it'll take the point of view of a person wrapped up in the story. So it will say, you know, Johnny is walking down the devastated streets around him, this, that, and the other. So we've kind of turned reality into a story. It's like, you know, and I think the reason that a lot of people who want to communicate things are doing this is they've realized that people respond to a story more than they do a sort of a dry documentary style list of facts. So are writers responsible for this sort of slow erosion of truth into storytelling? And, you know, where the narrative, if the narrative holds together in a kind of symbolic and meaningful way, it can almost, because reality isn't like that. Reality has lots of loose ends, and it doesn't sort of have these sort of narrative arcs with redemption at the end and everyone coming together in a big group hug. And do you wonder whether we're so steeped in storytelling now through long form storytelling in TV and things like that, that we kind of project that onto real life in a way? And do we see a kind of erosion of truth in the fact that I'm basically blaming it all on you writers. You can tell
just blame it on me specifically.
Honestly, like, all your fault.
I think humanity's interest in stories is because we tend to be a pattern matching species. Like, we see something and we immediately go, "Oh, that happened for a reason." Like, and that's partly our survival brain. And some way, our survival brain scaling out is become stories. So I mean, part of mine. I mean, trust you, there's a lot of this in XX as well. Bringing it back to you.
Oh, this is absolutely XX territory, and which I think is where your interests and my interests have quite a big overlap, and things like watch, for example. You sort of those kind of meta levels where you're telling a story, but you're also aware that you're telling a story, and in some way or form, the characters kind of know that they're in a story, and it's that sort of having your cake and eating it. And you know, it's. I think that's what I try and do in graphic design. It's you're speaking in the language. We were talking earlier about speaking in the language of, say, what a fantasy novel might look like, and how you can rise above that, and you can reference that and comment on it, but then also say something different and new. So it's that sort of awareness of the form. It's modernism. It's modernism. How I would define modernism, basically. Which is the 20th century is the century of modernism. Hence, XX, my novel, big plug. But back to you. It's all the writer's fault, Kieron.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, I think the simple answer to move on to, like, this is the sort of thing we literally talk for 2 hours over. But my simple answer is in some levels that the responsibility, and I hate the word responsibility, but the responsibility I would choose as a storyteller is to inoculate people against story. At least that's
well said. I think that's a perfect answer, Kieron. Yeah,
that's really topical language too.
Yeah.
Sorry, but you know, like Wick and Divine in a very real way was about that, how a story will lie to you and how you will fall for it. And over 50 issues, I basically did every single sort of twist and way to hurt the reader and deceive them. And this is how people will lie to you in real life. And this is why you'll fall for it. And this is why you'll believe it. And this is why it hurt me. And it's particularly hurt. So it's about how I have been lied to by the world as well. Moving to Die, because
that's what it's about.
Yeah, I was about to say, Ramsey asked, the journey to make
Yay!
Thank you very much, Chrissy. Like the journey towards making a typical issue. The journey towards making a typical issue. So I think it's quite an interesting thing to start. Like, let's skip the script stage, because everyone always knows about the script stage. Let's go to Stephanie, and we'll go around the. Actually, no, we'll go to Chrissy first, then Stephanie, then Clayton, then Ryan. So I've written the script, and I pass it to Chrissy. What happens?
Is a sort of system of strings and pulleys of making sure that things make sense for the story, making sure that things will make sense for Stephanie, which I think hopefully normally do a good job at, but sometimes do a terrible job at, and Stephanie sometimes has to come back with really fundamental questions that we failed to address. But it's not so much about blitzing the lettering, it's about seeing if it's going to work, at least as far as two writing type folks can conceptualize it, seeing if it will work on the page enough so that it can go to Stephanie and then she can, come back with her thoughts and questions and accusations. Yeah.
I don't do that very often.
No. The conversation, I mean, like, I put this in all my scripts as, a script is the start of a conversation rather than the end of it. Ideally, everything is in the script, but like, no, if we're not talking, it's there are artists I work with, and you just send the script and you never hear anything from them, and then the pages arrive back, and it's like it makes you think there might be a machine over there or something just printing it out. But okay, Stephanie, the script arrives in your desk. What happens?
So the first thing I need to read it and send you my thought about it, because otherwise I think you're stressed. But I was trying to find a way to put it. Basically, I'm doing kind of storytelling. There are the words, and I have to make them. How can I say? It's like you give me white from the egg, and I put sugar, and we have meringue in the end. It's just you both together. If you don't work them, if they don't work well together, it's just egg and sugar. But if you do it perfectly, it makes a meringue, and meringue is very good. I'm very bad at talking about it. I'm always talking about how it's like a dance, and I have to be in your steps, but not over your feet. And it's just the way I see it. Like two good dancers dancing together, they just bring the best out of each other. And so I'm trying to make your word make the most of themselves, and sometimes even bring a bit more if I can. Give some place for them. When I'm trying to do sequencing, I'm always keeping in thought somebody is gonna read it. So, and I'm trying to not be the kind of very dirigist. Is that a word? Like, I don't want to take the reader by the hands all the time. I want to leave them some place to make them their own conclusion. And sometimes maybe I'm wrong, but I'm trying to leave them a place for that. And so, yeah. And I'm apparently very bad. I'm thinking about the thought bubbles and texts, because it's just very somewhere in my head. I'm trying to be a bit more thoughtful about it, but Clayton has a lot of work to do after me, I think.
Hey, you're getting me paid.
But like, with no stuff, this is your first ongoing comic as well. So like, to sort of expand this out, like, what have you sort of learned about yourself as an artist by doing it? Because it's like the idea of doing it's just we're on issue 16 now. That's a lot of comics, and that's basic, and it's really nearer 20 issues because they're all long.
Yeah, it's like 375 pages or something. That's a lot of pages.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's the first ongoing I'm doing. It's always longer than I think it will be, but in the end it works. I hope so. But yeah, I have a good team.
Yeah. Anyway, then basically, Stephanie, we normally like 6 to 8 weeks, isn't it, for like you doing an issue? Would that be fair, Chrissy?
Yeah, I think what we're working on now is kind of 6 weeks and a few days. Yeah, like the sort of
6 weeks.
No, like it's now literally budgeted in exactly like that. 6 weeks and 3 days. Every issue is 6 weeks and 3 days. That's how it works. That's the system, and it's perfect. So.
That's just like it's more like a fairy promise, isn't it? As in we we will work together for 6 weeks and 3 days. 6 weeks for the
As long as nobody breaks their legs or is not in another lockdown, I guess it's okay.
Oh man, yeah, talking about the disasters around this book would be a different, much more depressing conversation. Oh man, there's a lot. We may come back to that later. Anyway, Stephanie's doing this, but like starts doing her pencils are like not even stick figures. Like I mean, they're like shaped.
Yeah, they're so ugly.
They're not ugly.
They're just gestury.
Yeah, gestury. That's a good word.
But they're very ugly. I'm so ashamed. But the thing is, doing good sketches takes me the same time I was doing the painting. So I'm not doing that. It's too long. Oh yeah, there are stick figures. I'm sorry.
I would say though that I think those figures are all that's needed. Like I know when we started working together, and when I first looked at your sketches, I was like, oh God, wait, what? I can't. Who? What? But like actually realizing what you're doing is it's exactly all you need. It's showing, are we close up, are we far away? Like a shape and it gives us exactly the scale of every panel and totally lets you read how you're building the page. And it's all you need.
Yeah. The shapes of the panels are very straight.
So actually we give some notes on them. Normally like what just some tweaks. Then Stephanie's painting. Then there's 2 threads happening now. So Stephanie's doing, and normally we get, because the way Stephanie paints is she paints upwards and she just keeps on adding. She's like a 3D printer. So it's not like, when is Stephanie's page is finished is kind of an open question. It's like, you always, you're like, I don't mean it's a bad thing. You like tweaking, like you play and like you're adding and removing stuff. But we get to
if you let me, I will make retakes until the last moment, just the day of the printing.
Yeah, but we're normally, unfortunately, like quite regularly lettering over black and whites rather than colours. And at the same time, actually, we'll do 2 threads here. Like when we get because we've also done the cover. No, actually, we'll come to Ryan last. So we've got we've got the black and white pages. I go back and do a lettering draft. This is the point where Chrissy, do you want to talk about lettering drafts?
Yeah. So if the first stage of script stuff is much more about, does this make sense for the story? Have you forgotten massive continuity stuff? You know, blah, blah, blah. Is it physically, is it going to work on the page? Do the sections feel balanced? All that stuff. This is much more like, yeah, but Chuck would never say it like that. Or, you know, it's the minutiae of the dialogue. And I don't know, Kate, I would be really interested to hear what Clayton's about to say about like how much we change or don't change compared to other comics. Because I always feel like seeing it on the Word document and haggling with Kieron over how would he say this is one job. But then when you see it against the finished art, and often when the colors come back in, it changes it again. It does have a different effect. And so we end up doing more changes. But yeah, I would say this stage is much more about trying to get the authenticity of the voices as well as communicating the key information that we want them to communicate to the readers.
So Clayton, we've sent you the script.
Yes.
Explain the hell.
Well, I go through the script and delete all the superfluous text that won't eventually be brought over to the page, like panel descriptions and the occasional lettering instruction. And once I've done that, I convert all the text that's left over to the different fonts and bold italics used throughout the book. And then as I'm doing that, I'm sometimes softly editing or looking for stuff to ask questions about, like, should this character have a custom voice, or is this thing in the script a typo, or is it just proper English? And that comes up a lot. Yes, color has a U in it, don't forget. And then once I bring it over to the page, I look at everything against Stephanie's artwork. And I've always wanted to ask you about this, but the end of my story is then I play lettering Tetris and place everything where I think it should go, and then send it off to Kieron and Chrissy. But I've always wondered, how much is there a change in detail between the color and black and white stage? Because the art that I see always looks really finely rendered, and like, aside from the addition of color, I don't really notice much of a change between those two stages besides a character being moved a centimeter to the left or something.
There is still a lot of, but basically when I do the black and white, I put all the lights and the shadows. After that, there is a first layer of color. Usually I do this with gradient map tool, and then some gradient colors. I don't change a lot, but sometimes I use the luminosity of the colors to flatten some. You know, I tend to put too much details on faces, and sometimes it has to be toned down, that kind of thing, because otherwise they look dirty. But,
Interesting.
Yeah, and sometimes also when you put the colors, there are some things that are standing out that shouldn't, and I will do a final layer over it where I will paint, to, I don't know, it's just sometimes I just want it to be perfect. It's never perfect, but as close as possible.
Cool.
I was supposed to say, I've just realised I can do this.
Hey.
So like, I can actually go over the reading out questions. I can do that, which is really exciting. I'm going to just do that constantly now. Okay.
I'm pretty sure you can add a screen with just pictures, and you could show some pictures of that.
Ooh. Yes, but that would involve having done something beforehand and prepared to actually show some stuff, Stephanie. And as you see, I'm wearing a jumper. Like I've done
Nothing else, just a jumper.
Show us your crazy desktop. Show us your crazy desktop.
No, trust me, my desktop would make anybody who's even slight. Like, you see my emails. Like, this is fake. Sorry, this is semi-famous that I occasionally. Okay, famous is probably overselling it, but like Can we get that?
Good.
82,421 unread emails. Like, honestly, my desktop scare people. Chrissy, we've got to 8,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nothing. Amateur.
8,326.
I have 2 rookies.
What about you, Ryan?
761. But they're probably like 10 years old.
And
I should really get back to people on, but have probably now gone to press. So
I turned all the notifications off on my phone, like all of the bubble, whatever they're called, corner notifications like that off on my phone. So I don't know what to tell you, but I feel great about it.
It's
He's the smartest of us all.
It's worth noting, the reason why I have so many is because I used to be a journalist and I'm on so many mailing lists and I never read any of them. I just know, but I'm also don't care enough to delete them. Yeah. So like,
unsubscribe. I did a massive unsubscribe about a month ago, and all of a sudden it's way less stressful because all of that stuff just stops coming in. I mean, you know what's happening in the wider world, of course, but that's the trade-off.
Just an horrible person. You know, my accountant once asked me, okay, what do I have to do because you don't answer your phone and you don't answer our emails? So how do we get in touch? Like, okay, if you really want to write me an email, you have to put urgent in upper caps in the title of the mail. This is the only way I'm opening it. This is what it does now.
Communicating with Stephanie is like in the Slack is like Stephanie is like the freedom of Stephanie is quite important. Like we have all these little conversation areas to have conversation in, and like you know like issue 1, issue 2, issue 3, productivity, and all those sort of things. But like no, like we'll put all conversation will go in any thread, seemingly at random.
That's true.
It's so much fun. It's like you know, it's a lot of fun.
Do you sensibly name all your Photoshop layers, Stephanie?
What's a good question?
Layer.
I bet you don't.
5 or something, and sometimes there is a layer called let's say the asterisk or whatever thing I'm pushing because I didn't mean to. So you know, new layer. Oh, straight. But yeah. No, they don't have names. God, that would be so much longer.
Yes.
I'll tell you something. I write using Scrivener, and Scrivener basically is a bit more like it's like Photoshop for words. And I'm going to call up an actual die script because I name my pages, and that's my brief synopsis of what happens in an issue. Let's call up issue 16. But while I'm doing that, we can move to Chrissy because it's about it's about a week before we're meant to go to press. We've gone through a couple of of lettering. I've finally written the back matter because the back matter is always the last thing to do. In that, ever since I've started doing journalism again, like I used to be a journalist for like 15 years, and the motivation to actually write journalism is almost nothing now. I have to work so hard to write a profile, and it turned out okay, but it just like breaks my heart to do it. Anyway, Chris has got all this, and talk about how you talked about Ryan about also include the talking about the cover about this. The cover and the back and stuff like that. So,
yeah. Well, Ryan did such an amazing job setting up the way that the back of the issue looks. You know, with that he's thought through how that looks, how all those other pages, the inside front cover with all of everyone's bio, the cast's pictures on, like the back cover, the amazing design with all the kind of the disappearing triangles that changes every issue. In terms of the back matter itself, I like this arc, for example, with all the interviews Kieron just mentioned, has been easier in that it's kind of a similar layout for each one. So I lay Kieron's text in, try and make things fit as best I can. I'm not a designer. I've worked in publishing for decades now, so I know how to shuffle my way around InDesign, but I'm not a designer. And then I very, very nervously send it over to Ryan to sort of say, like, is it okay? What have I done? Oh, should this go here? Where should this go? And he always spots. Ryan, your attention to detail is incredible. Like you even spot random typos in like a bit of small print somewhere. It's incredible.
I think it's like Clayton was saying, is one of the unsung parts of your job is to be a sub-editor along the way, and depending on who you're working with, there can be quite a lot of typos even at the 11th hour. I've got to say that there are very few in Dye, but I've worked on jobs where you get sent what is supposed to be final text for, an album or a book cover or something like that, and it's full of the most obvious grammatical errors and typos and you name it, and you just think to yourself, I could flag all this up and I could go back to this client and have a conversation about this, or I could just leave it as it is, or I could go through and sub it all, correct it all, send the job off and just see whether they notice or not, and 9 times out of 10 that's what I do.
Same.
So you end up by just to sort of and because you're last, like I said, this doesn't happen with Dye, but it does happen with quite a few other jobs that I'm working on. And it's because you're the backstop in a way. So all the stuff that hasn't been done up until that point finally sort of ends up on your desk. And because you're very close to print deadlines, quite often you've only got a day or two to turn this around. So you just think, in order to make everyone's job easier, I'll just make this obvious corrections is so obviously a typo, and you just do it and job done. But as you were saying, Chrissy, with an ongoing where you have a template so that all the issues will fit in a very similar fashion. I think the trick is to come up with something which you kind of plug in all the various elements to, and you have a sort of series look moving forwards. So you kind of solve all the design issues up front, and then from there on, it's just a case of reiterating and maybe bending the design a bit to accommodate new things as they come in. But if the design has been thought through thoroughly on day one, it'll last right the way through to the finale of the thing without you having to sort of bend it out of shape. And there was a thread on Twitter that was doing the rounds a few months ago where people were showing their racked spines. So there'll be like a series of 20 books in a series, and then one of them will have a completely different design where the logo is at the top rather than at the bottom, or it's letter spaced or some other thing.
Oh, I hate that.
Everyone was sharing their worst examples of this, where it's supposed to be a cohesive collector's set, and there's one wrong color or the wrong font, and your eye goes directly there. And sort of being a design nerd, that's all you see. The rest of it could be perfect, but if there's that horrible glitch in the program, that's all you will ever see. But it's got to the point on Dye where basically Chrissy just bolts all the stuff in, and it's pretty much a case of me going, yep, great, done, looks good to me. So my job is, I think if I do my job well, sort of on the first 3 or 4 issues, hopefully by the time we get to the 10th or 15th or 20th issue, it's just utterly plain sailing. And again, I would hope there's a design lesson in there that a lot of other comic publishers could learn something from. A bit of forethought and continuity goes a long way. Marvel Comics, mentioning no names, Marvel Comics, whose covers must be put together by, I don't know who they're put together by, but they're not graphic designers. Oh,
anyway, we'll move quickly.
I probably did. Being rude.
That's
but yes.
What Jamie wants to do. If you see the Wick div, we faded from white to black, which obviously is a cool idea.
Nice. Yes.
Yeah. But unfortunately, the fact they're all printed at different times meant it was impossible to do the right gradient. So Jamie's wish is to do a Kickstarter edition where we print them all at the same time, so we get the colours right. And that's absolutely the kind of take.
Well, you're also sort of running up against the vagaries of printers, and quite often printers will do improvements on your work. So you'll send in a final signed off piece of artwork, and someone will say, "Oh, it's a first issue of a new arc," and then someone will slap on a sort of starburst that they found on a sort of clip art site, and a bit of some free font that they downloaded, and so your carefully planned piece of graphic design where every last full stop has been sweated over sort of hits the stands, and it's got some absolute awful mess sort of stamped on the front of it because someone somewhere thought that some other thing needed to be flagged up.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress. But yes, the graphic designer's job is just basically to sort of hit the print deadline after everyone else has been late most of the time.
Yep.
I feel Clayton. I feel so much that it's you and Ryan, like Clayton. The number of sorry, all the shame is bubbling up.
Suffice to say, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. We are very grateful.
That's fine.
Right.
Great.
Part of the job.
Yeah.
Service with a smile.
Right.
Gritted teeth.
I'm going to read my page titles for the first issue of this arc of Die.
Oh, you're going to tell us about Scrivener, is that right?
Yeah.
I'm curious just to know what this is.
Scrivener is basically it's just you break the file down into, so every page of the comic is its individual document, and you open in two windows. You got your reference stuff on the side. You can move, so it keeps all your files together in a big kind of, it's like programming. It's a programming setup, and I've changed to that at the end of WicDiv because I wanted to change my writing style entirely. So changing the tools was a way to do that. But part of my actual thing is I do proper plotting, so I've got documents. But in terms of actually the page by page plotting, I create a page, give it a name, what roughly happens on that page, carry on, and then just move stuff around, and eventually it becomes an issue. So the synopsis for issue will be: opening shot, truck escape plan, walk to prison, arrival in prison, prison, final prison image, Chuck's party making next plan, plans 2, plans 3, plans 4, Ash and Sol again, more details. Leaves. Augustus entering the sewers. Remains of the fight. Ash and Izzy meeting. Ash and Izzy more meeting. Ash and Izzy set rules. And the courtier arrives. We are at war. Fallen start bit. Fighting the fallen. Reveal on. And I won't say that in case people haven't actually read the issue yet. But yeah, that's the working synopsis of that's what my equivalent of layers are for script.
Well, I think, Kieron, frankly, we're doing way too much work. We should just be sending this to Stephanie.
Yes.
That's what we call the Marvel method.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Kirby can flesh that out in an afternoon.
Oh, truck escape plan. I want to see Kirby's truck escape plan.
Oh, can you imagine it? It would be
So
like a
good.
massive truck with huge wheels and sort of jetpacks on the side or something.
Lots of pipes. Lots of pipes.
Right. We've been an hour 20, so I think we should go in a fast. Right, so I'm just going to go through questions and make them pop up, and we'll answer them relatively quickly. Relatively, I say. Okay, here's a question. How do you go about picking the quotes for each issue? When I'm researching, I mentioned the Scrivener document. Anytime I hit a quote that I think is usable, I just add it to my quotes document. I have far more quotes than I will ever need for Die. And then when I actually hit the issue, I look at my quotes and see what is the appropriate one for what I'm talking about. So yeah, it just comes through the research. You find cool stuff. Are there any other Die classes you have a mental take on, like druids? Yes. Yes, but not as developed. As in, I think the 6 are quite magically powerful, and I do have some ideas because there are some more weird dice. Like there's dice which are not traditional dice, so doing that is appealing. And there's a sort of druidy idea I have, which I don't know if I'll ever. I'm not sure it would ever work in the comic, but I could maybe work it in the game. But like, yeah, there's something a bit druidy. It's a bit soothsayery, and it basically leans into the idea of dice as fortune-telling tools. Because the idea, reading people's innards was basically playing dice was the same as reading the truth in people's innards, which of course what druids mainly did. You know, so like trying to lean into that kind of the idea of like reading the future of Druid. Anyway, would Ash resemble a real world company, like a reface thing? Would completely different? That's a really good question. So I should leave that up. And that's the reason why I didn't actually say the actor, sort of the actor choice, because I think that's one of these really quite complicated questions, and I'm not sure I'd be happy giving an answer off the cuff. Yeah,
I would say that she would look like her sister.
that's interesting. Yeah, like it's a resemblance because it's like it's complicated because they're all. It's the difference between the trans reading of Ash and like the concept of characterness, because like there's a lot of stuff going on there. And it's
characterness. Is characterness the word?
Absolutely.
Did you just coin it?
Yeah. That's not strictly speaking a question, but
but we're glad.
Oh, thank you. Yes. It's very easy to look good as a graphic designer in comics, which is Alan Moore said it's very easy to look good as a writer in comics, but I'm repurposing his quote for the design.
Did we have a plan if we... no, actually. I was kind of like, coming off the back of Wictive, it was like, I reckon I can get 20 issues out of this, and if I can't, I should probably go home. You know, like I could have ended... Like, it's more like I would have ended it unfinished. I mean, in some way, you know,
Yeah.
I could have probably done it in 10 issues. You know, like, what you do is you split the party, then you bring it back together. And you end up having a much more conclusion. But I probably wouldn't have. Sure, and we're going to do an RPG eventually, but we certainly have lots of things we want to do. Stephanie, has anyone got any dream die merchandise we would like to see?
Oh yeah, I actually want to design a box for the dices. You know, I want to do like a Fabergé egg that would open with the dice turning. That would be nice.
Yeah.
I want a talking grief sword.
That's great. So,
I don't know who would do the voice, but I would love just a sword that would tell me how much I suck all day.
yeah. It's like you press the button and it goes, "You're useless.
Yeah.
No one will ever love you."
It'd be a fun thing to bring out at parties.
In my head, it would have been in Alan Rickman's voice.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
That's good.
Well, do you remember you sent me, Kieron, a kind of die as a sort of reference, and it was this big. You know, you could have put it in a sling and killed an orc with it. Yes, the most enormous dice I've ever seen in my life. You roll that, and it never stops.
Yeah. It's like if there's ever a murder weapon we need, you know. It's
Yeah,
kind of like,
death by die.
yes. Merch you would like to see, Chrissy?
Oh, I actually. Well, this is going to sound like a plant now, but the shirts that Stephanie just put up of this cover art, I think, look so good. The black one looks so good.
Yeah, they do.
Other merch stuff.
It's also there's basically a dye t-shirt shop. So if you check my present newsletter, it links to the t-shirts we're talking about. So like, if anyone wants to buy one, a perfect Christmas gift. It won't arrive till after Christmas, but still.
I need to ask you who you get to print them because I need to do some.
Yeah, but
Sorry.
it's one. Sorry, Ryan. It's one of the print and the band ones, which is pretty. It just the quality is pretty good from what I've seen so far.
Okay.
Christy,
Right.
right answer.
No, it was Stephanie, I think, who was trying to say something just then.
Yeah, sorry, Stephanie, I interrupted
Oh,
you.
sorry, Stephanie.
You know, I sent you some chibi characters. I think that would be great on t-shirts with the small quotes from the comics.
Yeah.
Ryan?
Actually, someone even I think asked a question earlier. Dai is obviously screaming out for like a massive, oversized hardcover, like a pretty collected, nice, big something at some point. Like that would be amazing, right?
Yeah, it was like like the French edition. Obviously, it was not the French edition. It was the one for the press, for the journalists. But they sent it in a nice box with a set of dices. That was really cool.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
Yeah, very cool.
Ryan, have you got anything you would like to see in dye merchandise?
Well, I'd like to design it, whatever it is. So,
Yeah.
I I'm looking forward to seeing some sort of big collected edition, which isn't really merchandise, but it's the kind of what I find bizarre about comics is it works on the opposite principle to books. So with books, you start off with a hardback dust jacket, and then you work your way down through sort of smaller and smaller editions to your cheap throwaway paperback. And in comics, you go the other way. You start with your cheap floppy, and then you work up to the deluxe sort of absolute edition with extra pages in a die cut case or whatever. It's bizarre. It's completely the other way around.
Yeah.
But I love designing these high-end pieces. So I did a Kirby one actually, which I don't have to hand. I think it's downstairs. But you know, when you have the chance to sort of use spot varnishes and foils and holes and you know, that's sort of designer heaven. That is.
Yeah, honestly, when did the Wick div hardbacks? It's like, oh, we can afford shiny now. That was that is by far the most exciting thing in my entire career. Getting shiny.
Oh yeah.
People ask us, and obviously we'd love to do it. My thing is like, Wick div basically did 2 to 3 trades, and part of me just thinks this is one volume. Like, if we could get the spine to work, putting all 20 in one volume would be the way to do it. There is actually multiple questions. Like someone later says that whilst oversized is obviously great, there's something about also having it normal sized. Like, it's having it all in one volume at normal is also appealing, I guess. So like, there's various options there, and I would like to see not all of them, but you know, there is definitely an option there.
Well, I think if you wait long enough, it'll get repackaged eventually in every single format that anyone can come up with. You know, like the Love and Rockets books are available in the little tiny volumes now. You know, like like those sort of manga-sized paperbacks, but then also you get the big ones. So
yeah. I mean,
it'll happen. Capitalism will win, and everything will get reprinted multiple times, and we will buy them multiple times, and we will cut down rainforests full of paper in order to do so.
Yeah. I found myself, that might be the reason why I end up wanting longer issues, is that because in my head it's like fantasy books are thick, and that's part of the reason why collecting all 4 of them in a really big, you know, fantasy, it looks like a fantasy book now.
Yes.
So like the trades should be thicker, but of course doing 5 issues and just making them longer is no different than doing 6 issues and making them the same size.
Well, with 6 issues, it would neatly divide into a trilogy, and of course, you know, if there's one fantasy cliche that everyone has to abide by, is that it has to be a trilogy.
That's
so.
True.
How are you going to work that one?
Yeah. It's funny. I generally have got ideas for at least a couple of sequels now, like things I want to do. And it's like Die is quite different. Like Wick Diff had a hard ending, but Die, me and Stephanie is like, whilst there's a hard ending for this story, like the openness of the mythos, if you will, is very much there. So I'm excited to see. You know, we're not planning to go straight into a sequel or anything, but the idea maybe one day we'll do it. That's quite exciting.
Wow.
So scrolling down, seeing more questions. So the librarian note that this is about what got me thinking about different sizes. The librarian in me hopes to be an oversized hardcover, but also be a regular size to fit on shelves, which is good.
A lot of people are asking for the hardcover.
Hardcovers are just nice. Everyone loves hardcovers.
Yeah.
Bigger art. That's a good idea. Yeah, so we can see Stephanie's work bigger. That would be good.
Mm-hmm.
And bigger fonts, so we can, you know, maybe read all the too many words.
Nice.
This is probably a bit of a longer question, but like, I talk about fantasy. What's everyone's relationship with fantasy? We've obviously had Ryan's already, but like, do you want to briefly talk about your own relationship with fantasy? Starting with Stephanie.
Oh, then I don't remember the first time I was introduced to fantasy. Certainly through an old Super NES games, you know. No, that was the like Legend of Mana, maybe that kind of thing. Maybe there was some kind of books too, like very old children books. That I wouldn't make any assumption about it. But yeah, I think the Legend of Mana is my first real memory of having an introduction to fantasy. It felt very normal, you know. It felt right in a way. And after that, you know, I just discovered the very old. You know, my father, he had a collection of pulp books, the kind of thing that you buy at the train station. They were very bad books. And it had a lot of them. And there was, I remember one of them had like a naked man seen from behind on the cover. He was fighting a giant spider, and he was dressed with giant butterfly wings. He didn't have wings. He like suddenly killed a butterfly to get them. And I was like, okay, this is crappy, but there is something in this.
I do. I always love like attracted to bad stuff. I know the feeling. Clayton, you're in fantasy.
It's mixed. I have relationships with individual fantasy properties, not really fantasy as a genre, but the fantasy that I seem to like the most has a healthy dose of science fiction mixed into it. I'm really into the Final Fantasy games, or at least the ones that aren't MMOs, like 7, 8, 9, 10, and 6, and 12. 12 is fun. And I enjoyed 13. Oh, 7. Why did I think 12 when I saw that? Holy cow.
Mutant fingers.
I don't have enough hands for 12.
Whoops. Anyway. But yeah, I like Final Fantasy, and I read the Narnia books and Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit as a child, and I enjoyed them, but I like them more for their own stuff more so than that they were in a fantasy world. And I read Patrick Rothfuss's first book, The Name of the Wind, and enjoyed it for similar reasons. The setting didn't have much to do with it, but yeah, I like it. It's there. There are parts of it that I'm critical of, and there are parts of it that I really like. I'm reading Dune for the first time, which is a very science fiction book, but the fantasy elements there, like relating to monarchies and hierarchy and sword fighting, all very fantastic elements, and I enjoy that part of it too. So yeah, it's there. We're cool, but we're not dating or anything.
As I say, now you've read Dune, you're like, Ludocrats will probably make more sense. Actually, it's not going to make it won't make any more sense.
So I should go back and reread it. Okay.
Chrissy, you in fantasy?
Yeah, I actually, something strikes a chord with what Clayton says, of enjoying it, but enjoying certain bits of it for its own thing, rather than enjoying it because it's in a fantasy world, in quote marks. But like the Tolkien stuff, the question was about the Tolkien stuff. All the Tolkien books in this house are my books, not Kieron's books. So there's definitely something there. I was obsessed with Tolkien as a child, and I also read all of the children's fantasy stuff. Like I read, but Tolkien's the only one that I really kind of brought with me out of childhood, I think. And it's, as you said, it would be a much longer thing to try and figure out why that is right now. But yeah, I like. I mean, I also I would classify things like Alice in Wonderland as
no, absolutely, yeah,
fantastical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Like, I think I'm more interested in fantastical things, broadly speaking, than I am in like capital F fantasy sort of. Like you imagine the 3 covers in the bookshop and they're all brick-like, and it's. But then that's me being really. That's me probably having this sort of cliched little idea, whereas actually, oh God, I am into fantasy, aren't I? Well, I've learned something today.
You have power over me.
Oh my God, that was the best bit. Invoking Labyrinth at the end of our long, like however many weeks die campaign game was just the best thing. Sorry.
Ryan, anything else you want to add to what you said about fantasy earlier?
I was like Clayton. I was obsessed with science fiction, and probably read pretty much nothing else from the time I first discovered it, which was around, I don't know, 13 or something like that, up until sort of my mid-teens. So I was sort of imbued with science fiction. I read Dune. I enjoyed Dune. I read a series called The Witch World, which was written by Andre Norton, American sort of young adult. You'd call her. They used to call them juveniles, but I think they're called them young adult now. And I quite enjoyed that, although it sort of petered out a bit. I think there were just sort of endless sequels that sort of didn't really add much to it. But the first sort of 4 or 5 of those I quite enjoyed. And it said on the blurb on the front of the book said, comparable to Tolkien at its best. But having never read Tolkien, I wouldn't be able to tell you whether that was the case or not. But that's kind of the closest I got. And I was much more into the sort of science fictional stuff. And I think that the thing that I always went to for science fiction was the kind of big, weird ideas. And I remember being in, many years ago, I was in Forbidden Planet, and there was someone who was doing some kind of, I don't know, research into what people like in their science fiction and fantasy. And the question they were asking all the people in the shop was, what epitomizes escapism for you? And they came up to me, and I thought, escapism? I don't go to science fiction. I don't go to anywhere to escape. What are you escaping from? The real world's far too interesting to want to escape from it. So what science fiction gave me was this kind of these massive weird ideas and new ways of looking at the world, and sort of shaking things up and showing you new perspectives that you might not think of otherwise. It was very much not an escape from. It was a sort of it was an added extra, if you like. If you're reading sort of Philip Dick or somewhere, and it's someone like that, and he gets you to think about everyday things in a new way, or Ray Bradbury maybe, and then I really liked Arthur C. Clarke and those sort of expansive science fiction stories where sort of mankind sort of steps out onto the broader stage of the universe, and how that sort of affects us, and the questions we have to ask about ourselves, as well as what the universe may be like. So it was that kind of brain expansion that I went to science fiction for. And although I don't read, since XX came out, everyone's sending me their science fiction novels. So I've probably read more science fiction in the last 6 months than I've read in the last 6 years. But I mostly read science. So I read Scientific American and listen to science podcasts and things like that. So that kind of sense of wonder and that sense of possibility, I sort of switched to getting that from real science rather than science fiction as such. And out of that sort of batch of science fiction that I've been reading in the last few months, there's been some... I've just read the new Ted Chiang, if that's how you pronounce his name, short story collection, Exhalation, from Picador, who published XX. So I very kindly got sent a copy of that, and that's short stories, but there's some great short stories in that. So I've been really impressed with that. I was also sent another one, which was, I won't name names, but it was it read like fan fiction. It wasn't. We were talking earlier about the kind of the metatextual thing that you, Kieron, sort of get into your writing, where you look at the levels upon the levels of sort of story and what you're actually structuring and saying in a bigger way. And it was one of those books where I was looking for this, and then after about 300 or 400 pages, I realised that it wasn't there, and pretty much all we had were the kind of, and then they did this, and then they did this, and then they did this, and there's a lot of that kind of stuff out there, which I guess is escapism. It sort of transports you into this little world with these characters, but it doesn't say anything. It doesn't address any interesting issues or themes or anything.
There's two things that come to mind. Sorry, who was someone saying something?
No, I was rambling on. But,
no, definitely. There's two things that come to mind, and they're both true and contradictory. The fiction that allows you to imagine the world other than it is a radical act, because fiction that makes you think of the world as it is by definition a conservative act. But at the same time, there's a great quote by Tolkien that, in fact, I saw it used by someone else recently as well. But like people who sort of are too down on escapism are confusing the cowardice of a deserter than the cowardice of a deserter rather than the movement of a prisoner. And that's it's not exactly that phrasing, but the idea that there's some talking about as in you're hiding from reality versus no, we are trapped by reality, we're trying to escape to somewhere better. And that could be phrased either a radical act or like a cowardly act. You know, there's lots of stuff going on in there. But this is also, you mentioned about books just being to transport you elsewhere. This vaguely links to the next question I wanted to pop up. In that Lilith was talking about, has COVID changed our work thing? Because one of the things about anything about this year is how much even basic escape, like something vaguely comfortable is okay. You know, looking after ourselves is useful, I guess. So has anyone got anything to, my basic short answer was, it has not changed our work method at all, except me and Ryan no longer see each other in the pub like once a month.
Kieron, I'm so looking forward to just having a beer and a chat in a normal situation. You know, that's got to be the thing that I've really missed, is just that sort of random freewheeling social life that is now sort of so much more constrained. I mean, it's been, you know, I've been doing sort of like long form Skypes with people, and you know, we did 2 book launches for XX. I'm not plugging my book. I am plugging. And both of them were just me and Grant, and it was just like what we normally talk about, but it was like 2 or 3 hours of this with people watching us on Skype or wherever it was. Yeah. But that's what I'm missing, is these kinds of sort of conversations that, you know, get your grey matter working, and you know, they send you back to your art with a renewed sense of purpose and possibility. And I think when you're sort of isolated, you miss that. It sort of, you know, you can get a bit sort of stale, I think.
The rejuvenatory aspects. I mean, like, if I was going to answer this, if I was going to, also, I want to be finishing by 8. So, like, if I was rushing through the questions, I was just going to answer, we're all depressed now, and then move to the next question. That was going to be my basic answer. Has anyone got anything else they'd like to add to that?
Much fewer distractions, I'll tell you that for sure.
Well, I didn't like it, honestly. No, but you know, the thing is, I've been a digital nomad. Like, this is the term, I guess. And I cannot work home for a very long time. I need to be outside. I need to work in a place with other people. The first lockdown was terrible for me. I couldn't focus at all. So in the end, the second lockdown was way better because I could go to my office. And, you know, the second one, of course, there was no planes, no conventions, no cafes, and no restaurants. But at least I could go to the office and see my friends. And my life was not so much different as the normal one. Just a bit less fun, I guess. But the first lockdown was terrible for me. Work-wise. For the rest, I did yoga, I cooked, you know, and did more yoga, a bit of fitness. I had a VR station, not so bad, but for work, not good.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that, I mean, I've been back to the studio twice since March, just to pick up heaps of mail, and that's it. And there's no one there. It's just, yeah, I can work here. I mean, I'm in my sort of home office at the moment, but it's not the same as sort of being in an office with a working atmosphere with other people who are also working. It sort of keeps you sharp, I think. There's always chocolate downstairs to distract me here.
That's good.
So my friends have just sent us some toffee, which is rude because I've just immediately I've eaten like a fist worth of toffee today. Chris, you got anything you want to add quickly before we move on?
A fist of toffee.
That's the Die sequel's name now, by the way. It's Die
Fist
of Coffee.
That's my favorite Western.
Yeah. It's like the caramel gold. It's like
Planning for caramel gold. Planning for Quality Street.
Right. Okay. Question.
Did you know Quality Street in America, Clayton?
Do we have what?
Quality Street. You heard of that?
No, I don't think so.
It's like a Christmas tradition where you get this big sort of octagonal box tin of mostly inedible chocolates, and everyone.
We have those Danish cookie things that come in the round tins that mostly go uneaten, that we find the following June when we're cleaning out our houses.
They've all congealed into a huge lump.
It's just one huge cookie. You need a knife and fork.
Okay, quick one. Like, this says how long this question has been here, though. Like, what character class would you like to play in Die, basically? Stephanie, you can ask as well. You know, so if you were playing a game of Die, or you dropped into Die, what character class would you be? If you don't know, you know, we can worry.
There is, you know, the time we played, it was really a good fit for me compared to what I would like to play, but I am the fool, you know. That's terrible. Like, we have a lot more in common than I care to admit, and that's, I don't know if I like this, but I am the fool.
Chrissy?
Yeah, I think this question must refer to when I was talking before about fools. Right, and wanting, I'm fool all the way, Stephanie. There is no shame in playing an excellent fool.
Clayton?
Well, before hearing Chrissy's fool pitch, I would have said God Wrangler or whatever it was. But yeah, fool all the way. That sounds great.
I love the idea that we're just building a party of idiots.
Yeah, a party of fools is probably another name for Die Off.
The party of fools in the fistful of toffee.
I'd go and see that film.
Next question was like, is that exactly the same? I would give Chrissy a fool. I'll give Ryan a Neo. I'll probably give Clayton a fool as well. Any thoughts about race-based characteristics should be moved from D&D? I find it a bit weird that D&D still uses the word race. I mean, I can't understand why it's not species. But I'm skipping any questions which are basically just about RPGs because I'm the only person who really plays it serious, you know, quote unquote seriously.
Phew.
Quote unquote seriously. That's my art. Scrolling down. Quick, like we're rushing in a bit, but another compliment for the lovely design. Ryan, how did you end up on the project? What made you interested?
I think you asked me in the pub, Kieron. I think that was the sort of that was the interview and the pitch.
Yeah, I sort of like
it's as simple as that, wasn't it?
It was kind of slinking up.
Sorry,
it's kind of like slinking up to you and offering you a drink outside, wasn't it?
Yeah, or something. I think a lot of the graphic design I get asked to do is just because I know people who need a graphic designer. It's I think this has been my sort of very well-planned career for the last however many decades, is that I haven't had a sort of plan. It's just that sort of I seem to be the designer that people ask to do things, and most of the time the stuff I get asked to do I really like, so it's a sort of win-win situation. So it's nice to be asked, and thank you, Kieron, and I'm glad that it turned out so well. No small amount due to Stephanie, who came up with the idea of the die on the front in the first place anyway, so I can lay no claim to that. All I did was sort of work outwards from that initial concept, so I can't all I have to do is a lot of the time when you're a graphic designer, I think your job is quite often to get out of the way, because what you don't want to do is overpower the art or the idea. So you've just got to sort of present it and articulate it in a sort of suitable fashion without overpowering it. You don't want to be the graphic design equivalent of that sort of annoying drummer who does a sort of 5-minute drum solo in the middle of the song just because he can.
Yeah, my lettering philosophy lately has been don't be louder than the rest of the band.
Well, I think I think a band is a good analogy, because I've got to say that all of the best jobs I've ever worked on have been lots of people with different skills but overlapping skills coming together to make something that's more than the sum of its parts. And I think where that really works is where you're talking about the big ideas. You know, what are we trying to say here? What's the story about? How do we articulate that? How do we present what everyone's doing to the potential reader in such a way that they get what it is that this is all about? All of those conversations, I think, really get the best out of people, because you're all cohering around a central message. And where these things go utterly wrong is where you've done like 20 or 30 logos, and the person at the other end, mentioning no names, is saying, can we see another? And you're saying, well, is there anything specific about the ones that I've already done that sort of closer or further away from where you want to be? I don't know. I'll know when I see it. Can I see another, please? And it sort of goes on and on like this without any deeper conversation about what it is you're all trying to do. So you end up by just sort of throwing shit at the wall and hope that something will stick, which is never a good position to be in. And I'm sure you've been in that way as a writer, Kieron. You just have no idea what their criteria are and what they're expecting, and it's just a big mystery that you're trying to plumb by I don't know, by psychic powers or something. Who knows?
I think it's hard. I mean, writers is at least you can talk about stories and feelings, and you look for. I mean, there's a thing they say in Hollywood: the note behind the note. So you'll get an executive saying something to you, and you're not really listening to what they're saying. You're listening to say why have they said that. As in, if they say something like, "I don't like this character," they're not really saying that character's unlikable. They're talking about we need to establish stuff more. So there's a lot about the writer's job is to decode them, and I think it's much harder for like a designer because they don't understand. There's no language there at all. Like people are they can't express how they feel about a logo. So you're kind of trapped there. It must be a nightmare.
Well, this is another sort of bizarre thing. I think that having done a lot of graphic design for say book covers for sort of mainstream novelists, for example, is that I think you're used to working in a world where you sort of understand shapes and colors and what they mean. So, if you did a cover and it was bright red and the type was really bold, it might look quite sort of angry and direct. But if you did another cover and it was in sort of pale mauve and the type was very delicate and fiddly, it would say something else completely different. And so everyone understands there's this kind of language that of graphic design, of art in general, the way things look, there's a language to it. But I keep on meeting people who don't seem to speak this language. And so you have to sort of talk them through something that you think is kind of there on the page, but you have to convert it into words. And then they'll go, oh, right, okay, right, I can sort of see what you're saying here. So I think there are people who are sort of visually tone deaf in a way. And bizarrely, a lot of them end up in publishers where I guess they're used to dealing with words, but I don't know. I think comic people are words people and pictures people rolled up into one. I think you have to be at that sort of intersection of the two. That's what it's all about. But I think there are pictures people who don't read, and I think there are readers who, if you stuck them in an art gallery, would have no idea what they're looking at whatsoever. So I think this is why comics are so fucking brilliant.
This is why we're the best. We have 9 minutes left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the questions and no answer longer than 2 sentences.
Okay.
Like everyone get no 2 sentences, no 2, maybe 3 if it's a proper big one, but definitely no longer. Ideally 1 sentence. Right, Stephanie, go.
Other artists seem to be what?
Basically, other artists seem to do loads of covers. Do you deliberately do less covers, or do you do as many? How do you judge how many covers is too many?
What do you mean? Do you mean my work?
I think that yes, I think outside diet. I think there's implication
Oh, I just have no time.
Because we're trying. Because we break Stephanie. Okay, Stephanie, this is going to be a tricky one in 3 sentences.
Oh no, that's easy. I just do what feels right.
Hey, right. Do I have a plan about doing a book on critics the way Phonogram is about fans and Wikdiv is about artists? I think Phonogram is actually mainly about critics. There's a handful of fan characters in the second arc, but I think mostly all apart from people like Penny, the majority of the phonomancers are people who've gone too far down the hole. And that's what, people who basically have pleasure leached from them and they're incapable of actually really loving anything ever again. And of course, that's about critics. I think Phonogram's that. But there is another book called Multimedium I wanted to do way back in the day. And maybe there's a book about critic creators. We'll see. There's definitely one idea I want to do.
You should do it.
Yeah. As about critic creators or...
The ultimate paradox.
Yeah, honestly, it's going to be messy. Like, it's kind of... I've got the idea of the project is like... After Peter Cannon, I've got an idea to turn the dial up on Peter Cannon. And I haven't quite... Has it... Just, okay, you think that was formally showy. Let's do something that really goes for it and makes that the clever of the book. And puts that right at the heart. And I just haven't pulled the trigger on that because I want to do more thinking around it. Because I know what I want to do, but I'm also slightly scared of writing it.
There's something about...
That's more than 2 sentences, Kieron.
Yeah, that was like 18.
Yeah, oh my God,
There
I'm
were
so
like
sorry.
20 sentences or something.
Yeah, there was just deleted all the full stops. Sorry about that.
Doesn't apply to the Dungeon Master. The
That was a
rule.
lot of commas.
He gets to bend the rules.
He
Mm.
makes rules and then he breaks them. Actually, yeah, we thought about
I have now.
cards for a while.
That is true.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to, but on the other hand, doing that amount of art is hard.
How do I approach lettering die? I try to get as much into Kieron and Stephanie's heads as possible while crafting custom voices, which can sometimes be a scary experience. But apart from that, it's about like any other job.
I like how you coordinate the colors.
Thank you. I'm sampling from your work directly,
Yeah,
so it doesn't pop out too much.
I really love that.
Yes.
No.
That's a bit self-serving, Kieron, seeing as you bring them up yourself.
I just like ironic arrogant. It's like
Yeah.
I've been just completely shameful, shamed and embarrassed, or most arrogant man on earth. I've got nothing in between. I would say the current 2 issues of Once a Future are actually about Santa Claus. Like, the character we introduced is clearly Santa Claus. Oh God! Ryan's some magic in 3 sentences.
Also, you talk for a bit about one of the best things about my server wrote, The Rise of Fallen Empire. Well, if you're really interested, both of the XX book launches are on YouTube, so just head over there where Grant and I waffle on about magic and all manner of other esoteric. We basically disappear up our own arses over the course of about 2 hours. So if you're interested in checking us out, go and look. We cover most of that and more. Oh, and what was the other question? The rise and fall of empires. What was the question? That was a weird one because it was 14 pages and it was pretty much about it. It was a 2 or 3 paragraph script that Grant sent me, and I just sort of ran with it. So it was more like an idea rather than a script. So yes, interesting. It was fun to do.
3 sentences. Do I expect? To be honest, the way dies for 4th arcs go were already like this, so it is a bit weird that the way that the COVID that 2020 has been as 2020 as it has been creepy, and the whole Alan Moore Morrison being haunted by fiction aspect that's been very real. I mean, it's not quite Death of Bowie, but at the same time it is off. As in Bowie died on the same day he died in Wictive. Scrolling down. Let's go this one. I'm going to say Delighted the Dwarf.
Yeah, he's cute.
Anyone else?
Yeah, to be honest, I would have said Delighted as well. There's just something so pure and charming and doomed, but just in the world of Kieron's head, you always have to be sort of, I don't know. I like those characters a lot. Do what they say on the tin.
Yeah.
I have a special place in my heart for the dog.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
I do actually quite like the fair as well. Like the fair in terms of this weird sort of mathematical entity in the middle of all of this weird rule bending fantasy. I quite like them, and I love the way visually. I just love how different they feel when they turn up.
I almost went with the fair, but I think I'm going with Izzy.
This is great.
Her arc has been the most interesting to me.
Especially because there's a lot of stuff still to reveal in Izzy in the fourth arc. Like, not that it's not a big twist book die. That's the thing. It's not like it's not the way Wickdiv was, but it's still got a lot of character depth to reveal, I think. Ryan.
Ryan, how's the work on the Black Locomotive, your second novel graphic going? It's done. It's been finished for over a year and a half.
Nice.
It's probably coming out in August next year.
How big is it?
It's about a third of it's about 350 pages, so it's much, much shorter. No, XX was a ridiculous one-off.
Yeah.
That's the American edition. The English edition, this is printed on Bible paper. So no, it's shorter. It's shorter. That's my best recommendation for it.
Shirt. When will see the shirt from XX is the thing, Ryan?
Possibly when I get my website sorted, which has been an ongoing battle, but I think we're sort of in the home stretch on that. I mean, the problem with my website, it also sells my fonts, and so there's an enormous back catalogue of fonts that you have to somehow get up there and make available for purchase, and so the technicalities of it are a bit of a nightmare, but I've got someone who seems to know what they're doing, sorting all that out. So once we get a shop up again, then maybe we can start thinking about doing all these things. I mean, the problem is that there's always more interesting things to do than me making something that I can sell on the website, because I don't want to spend my days going to the post office with boxes. So these things tend to get requested and then forgotten about. But one day I need an assistant, I think. I need a Chrissy to sort all my...
Chrissy does not sort that stuff. No. Well, we need an assistant.
She's shaking her head. Okay.
Yeah. Chrissy is an editor.
I need someone to whip me into shape.
What musicals? I would describe it as Outfolk played solely with feedback. A request for clothes. They'll buy Chuck's rad jacket. And yes, I would love that. No, that's like, honestly, I'm not even sure it ever happened, but like, I've definitely got some thoughts. Scrolling down, see if there's any more. We might be able to stop. Oh, Ramsey actually gives me the quote: "The escape of the prisoner and the flight of the deserter are the two things." Mitch, what advice would you die if you aren't familiar with the system that the personas that the group bonded over? I would probably, so the part of die is that basically you play a fake role-playing group. I would like lean into asking players. The thing is, you're always allowed to ask players the questions. Like, just that, or even say, do you mind if we don't do that? You know what I mean? It's like, if the idea of you having to wrestle with something you don't know, just like, maybe I'm not cool with running that. Or alternatively, ask a lot of them questions as in, so how do you think that's going to look like? Or really mash up with your real world stuff. There is a die playlist. It works completely differently to all other ones. It is procedurally generated. After I seeded it with one song called Cherry Lee by Gans. Any theme music for any of the arcs? Not really. In Wick and the Divine, I made everything have a theme tune. With Die, I was deliberately going completely the other way. As in, I wanted to do
a lot of music while I'm painting, actually.
These days, what do you listen to?
Blackpink.
I was listening to this week as well.
That's good.
And we have burnt through all our questions, which is good. That means I don't have to do anything in my newsletter because I said I would in chat. Thank you very much for joining. Has anyone got anything else to say?
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, I'm into fantasy.
Nice.
Now, I think that's got a few of the graphic design tropes we were talking about earlier on. It's got an aged scroll that's throwing around the edges. Maybe I should, if I'd have designed the Die logo with sort of scrolls with sort of,
that could be
yellow
nice.
paper and everything.
Lowercase script.
Artist variant. There should be a graphist variant.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
I tell you, it's like I do love the idea of doing the Die RPG in a kind of like a deliberately produced found object box. Like, it's all battered cardboard, broken edges, and you open it up and it's all like weathered and weird. But on the other hand, I really just want not a very pretty book. I mean, the one thing Stephanie wants to do is a GM shield. No idea what GM shield being the big thing you stick in front of the GM, and like what a Stephanie Hands, Ryan Hughes designed shield that appeals to me as well.
That would be.
Anyway,
We'll do it. GM makes me think of genetically modified.
that also works. Right, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone and stop the stream in a second. Basically, thanks for coming. Die, the great game, is out. We'll be probably back in May 2020. Buy it for yourself, buy it for your friends. Follow my newsletter and I'll keep you up to date on all things Die. Thanks so much for the support. This has been a hell of a book that we've got to do, and like the response we get back is enormous. Speak to everyone else soon. And yes, so everyone's saying thank you, which is very sweet. And I will speak to everyone soon. I'm going to stop the broadcast. Bye.
Bye.